Glasses, I need glasses. Good evening and welcome to the Anaheim Planning Commission of March 10th, 2025. My name is Christopher Walker, Chairperson of the Anaheim Planning Commission. Spanish interpreting services are provided for tonight's meeting. Simultaneous Spanish interpretation is provided through the use of headsets, and consecutive interpretation is available to anyone who'd like to address the Planning Commission. I would like to call forward tonight's interpreter to say a few words.
En la sesión de hoy se ofrece interpretación al español. Para las personas que quieren escuchar, hay dispositivos para escuchar interpretación simultánea. Para los que quieran hablar al comité, hay interpretación consecutiva. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. As a reminder, Planning Commission meetings are broadcast on all our channels, including the web, Anaheim, and Anaheim TV Channel 3. The first order of business is to salute the flag. I will lead us in the flag salute tonight. Will everyone please stand and begin? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will next ask the Planning Commission Secretary to take a verbal roll call vote of all Planning Commissioners.
Chairperson Walker.
Here.
Vice Chair Tran Martin.
Here.
Commissioner Lieberman.
Here.
Commissioner Perez.
Here.
Commissioner Castro.
Here.
Commissioner Abdul Rahman.
Here.
Commissioner Kelly.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. If you would all please silence your electronic communications devices so that they don't disrupt the proceeding, I would appreciate that. The doors at the back of the room are automatic. Please do not stand in front of them. They open when you get close to them, and they don't close until you walk down the hall. Please move away from the automatic doors and allow them to close. Today we have one public hearing item on our agenda. I would ask members of the public who wish to speak during the public item to please complete a yellow speaker card and give it to staff if you have not already done so. The cards can be found on the entrance table outside. Please keep the remarks as brief as you can. We are influenced more by the content than the length of your presentation. First, we provide an opportunity for any member of the public to speak on items of interest to the public that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on any item?
Just for the record, Mr. Chairman, I did submit a card for speaking. And the housing element is like the cornerstone of tomorrow.
I understand, sir. I apologize. This is for items other than the items on the agenda.
Never mind.
Does anyone want to speak on any item other than the items on the agenda? Thank you. Prior to beginning the public hearing, I will ask that planning commissioners for any disclosures they wish to make regarding the public hearing item on today's agenda.
I do have one. I missed the last meeting, but I reviewed it through the records.
Anyone else? Thank you. Item number 1 is a request for the Planning Commission to recommend City Council approval for consideration at any future City Council meeting. I will now begin the public hearing and ask staff to make a presentation on item 1. Christine, I believe.
Good evening, Chair Walker, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Christine Nguyen, and with me tonight is Bryant De La Torre from our housing element consultant, Kimley Horn and Associates. The item before you tonight is a city-initiated request to update the general plan housing element. The housing element is a state-required part of the general plan. It addresses Anaheim's housing needs over an 8-year period, which is 2021 to 2029. The last housing element update, or the 5th cycle, was adopted in 2014. The housing element update focuses on meeting the city's housing needs, identifying potential sites, and ensuring compliance with the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, or RHNA, from the Southern California Association of Governments, or SCAG, and the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. The housing element is organized into 4 chapters and 3 appendices. It outlines the city's housing strategy, includes an overview of its purpose, an analysis of demographics and special needs populations, and an assessment of housing constraints and resources. It also evaluates fair housing considerations, identifies potential housing sites, and details policies and programs to meet RHNA obligations and housing goals through 2029. The appendices provide key analyses and insights, including the city's progress in achieving the goals of the 2014 to 2021 housing element, assessing the city's ability to meet housing obligations while preserving affordable housing, and detailing public engagement efforts, including the role of the Housing Element Update Committee, the HEUC, in gathering community input. Chapter 4 of the Housing Element Update outlines the necessary actions to address current and future housing needs, ensure compliance with state law, and integrate community feedback. The primary focus is on expanding affordable housing opportunities for extremely low to moderate income households. The Housing Policy Program for the 2021 through 2029 housing element is structured around 5 key strategies to address the city's housing needs. Housing production focuses on creating diverse rental and for-sale housing options, while conservation and preservation aim to maintain existing housing. Quality and design policies ensure well-designed, high-quality living spaces, and rehabilitation efforts focus on improving and restoring current housing. Lastly, affordable housing opportunities seek to expand housing options for low-income households. Each strategy area incorporates several measures to achieve the city's housing policy objectives within a defined period. One of the new state-mandated strategies in the Housing Element Update focuses on affirmatively furthering fair housing, or AFFH. AFFH focuses on equal access to housing for all, regardless of race, color, national origin, etc. The Housing Element Update outlines specific actions to address potential barriers to AFFH through both housing mobility and place-based strategies. Housing mobility refers to the ability of individuals or families to move between housing options, influenced by affordability, economic opportunities, and access to services. Disparities in mobility, often shaped by socioeconomic and racial factors, limit access to high-opportunity neighborhoods. The Housing Element Update aims to expand affordable housing, improve mobility, and address resource needs, particularly in racially concentrated areas of affluence, or RCAAs. Mobility strategies focus on expanding affordable housing through information sharing, workshops, and zoning code streamlining. Efforts include promoting ADU development, implementing a homelessness action plan to reduce homelessness by 70%, and supporting the creation of 100 special needs housing units through funding assistance. Place-based strategies aim to revitalize low-opportunity, high-poverty areas by investing in neighborhood improvements, preserving affordable housing, and enhancing infrastructure. Example efforts include promoting higher density housing near public transit, revitalizing disadvantaged neighborhoods, supporting affordable housing services, and rehabilitating substandard housing to improve living conditions. HCD assigns housing units to regions based on the RHNA, which are then distributed among cities and counties. For the sixth cycle, Anaheim was allocated 17,453 new housing units. The table on the screen illustrates the city's RHNA need for the planning period by income category. Anaheim plans to meet its 2021 to 2029 RHNA by identifying suitable housing sites and implementing supportive policies. Strategies include leveraging projects in progress, promoting ADU development, and utilizing candidate sites within existing zones, the Center City Corridors Plan, and areas requiring zoning changes. City-owned properties are also considered for housing development. This table summarizes Anaheim's RHNA allocation and types of sites projected to meet the housing need for each income category. The candidate sites identified include a surplus over the required units to account for market changes and potential project developments. The selected sites range from half an acre to 10 acres and either currently permit residential development or require a general plan amendment or zoning action. The sites are also strategically located near essential resources like transportation, schools, and grocery stores to enhance fair housing opportunities and improve residents' quality of life. Anaheim's housing element underwent multiple reviews and revisions following its initial submission to HCD in October of 2021. After HCD's December 2021 comments, the city revised and resubmitted drafts in 2022, 2023, and 2024 to address requests for additional local data, increased justification for candidate sites, and more detailed implementation strategies and timelines for the policy program. On January 30th, 2025, HCD confirmed the revised draft meets state housing element law requirements, but will not be in full compliance until the city completes the necessary rezoning to meet RHNA obligations. Final approval will follow adoption and submission of the completed housing element. As part of the sixth cycle housing element update, staff conducted extensive public outreach beginning in early 2021 through community workshops, housing element update committee meetings, and an online survey to gather input on housing policies. Outreach efforts included bilingual advertising and events to ensure broad participation. Key activities featured 3 community workshops, 5 technical focus group interviews, and multiple commission and council workshops. A dedicated website provided resources, and the draft housing element was made available for public review, with transparency ensured through postings and notifications before submission to HCD. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council determine that the proposed General Plan Housing Element update is not subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. The update aligns with state law and establishes policies for RHNA compliance without proposing specific development projects. Any zoning or land use changes impacting the environment will undergo separate environmental review as part of the General Plan Focus update. Future housing developments will also be subject to city review, ensuring no significant environmental effects from the housing element update itself. Staff believes that it has prepared the 2021 to 2029 housing element update in compliance with state law. To comply with all state law requirements, and because local governments are required to adopt updated housing elements every 8 years, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the resolution recommending City Council approval and adoption of the updated General Plan housing element. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are available to address any questions.
Thank you. Any commissioners want to speak, ask questions?
When I look at that, the number of the units and the breakdown based on the income, what kind of formula do you use?
Do you mean the number of units that we were required to meet for the arena?
Yes, and based on the income, yes.
So that formula comes from SCAG, from the Southern California Association of Governments, and they actually divide that up amongst other local governments in the Southern California region. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so during the arena determination process, SCAG, along with all SCAG members, will develop this calculation essentially depending on economic increase within areas and depending on need. There's various metrics that go into that as well. There's a methodology, and that's SCAG's methodology. Individual jurisdictions can appeal that. There's been, I believe, 4 or 5 within the SCAG regions that successfully appealed and got their numbers reduced. But that generally those income breakdowns that you'll see on the screen, those generally will come from that SCAG methodology.
Okay, can I see the formula?
We can pull it up, I'm sure, but it's like a 300-page document straight from SCAG. And they have every single metric that they include in there.
Okay, all right.
Commissioner Perez?
I have a few questions. Main one, what was the main portion needed for revision in order for the housing element to get approved from HCD? And I bring it up more as like a timeline question, because I know other cities submitted their housing element at the same time we did, but were approved at a lot earlier time. So kind of if you could give us some clarification.
So a lot of the questions that HCD had or requests for revisions revolved a lot around more of a timeline for the programs that we either already had or were proposing. And so hard deadlines of when we were proposing to have them. A lot of it also had to do with just additional data that they were looking for to include within the housing document itself. Most of the policies and programs remain the same throughout the course of the last 4 years, but a lot of it had to do with just additional data that they wanted to include within the document.
Okay, perfect, thank you. I had another further question. Actually, you already have the table up here. Do we have a further breakdown of the income category units by district? Or is like the assumption that every housing opportunity site is gonna activate the sliding scale?
So we have a slide that we can show you units, candidate sites by district. The affordability assumptions is also, as Brian was talking about, calculations. So the affordability assumptions are really a driver coming from state law, the size of the parcel, and the density that could be constructed dictates the essentially assigned affordability, which is why you see we have a surplus of sites, because sites may develop based on the calculation or they may develop differently. So we proposed a surplus to account for that.
And that was kind of going to get to my next point, because I think what we've seen here in the last, few years, there's appetite for certain density and intensification in certain areas in the city. And I think that's that's a natural mathematical barrier once we start talking about floor area ratios in certain housing sites. So that's why I was interested in, and I'm assuming the assumption is that ultimately it's more of the total end units, not necessarily we're prescribed to have income sites by district or income units by of the already proposed sites, right?
Correct. So we get to our 20,560 again based on essentially a calculation. The units we may have something identified as market based on that calculation that may develop as affordable. We may have something identified as affordable that may develop as market. Again, that's why we have the surplus built in there. And then also state law has something called no net loss. So if at some point we deplete everything and we need to rezone additional, that's on the city to find additional sites.
Okay, perfect. Now I actually have some questions about the diversity of units. In our housing elements, do we address any, I guess, diversity in unit products in certain, in the aspect of co-living units or even micro units? And are those graded differently by SCAG?
So the units themselves aren't calculated differently or scored differently, but we do have in our policy program, as Christy mentioned, looking at ADU production, looking at other options for co-living and what that looks like. So that's, we don't have specific units for the co-living, but we do have looking into what that opportunity could be included in our policy programs.
Okay, perfect. And I think my last question, do we have like a breakdown of the amount of adequate sites that we've already identified, breakdown by district? Just so we just have a ballpark?
We do. We have a breakdown of all of the candidate sites by districts, which, yeah, this is this screen. And then we also have maps for each district, also included in the housing element.
Okay, do you mind if we just go through, just to go through them all?
Sure. So the by district map?
Correct.
Sure.
So the different, you'll notice some different color coding. So the yellow here is, so these are sites that are already identified for residential. So for instance, here you've got Beach Boulevard specific plan. So they are not built out to the capacity under the Beach Boulevard specific plan. So they're essentially in the candidate site list as allowing residential without any further action needed by the city. The green are pipeline projects. So these are some stage of the application process that a developer has made for the site for a certain number of units. So in District 1, those are the two types of sites that we have. Go to the next slide. Similarly, in District 2, again, we have either sites in yellow that allow residential that's not currently built or pipeline projects. Next slide. And then District 3, you can see now we're adding in sites that will require a general plan in red, a general plan amendment, in addition to those that are pipeline and currently allow residential. Same situation in District 4, where we're adding sites in the Platinum Triangle area that will require a general plan and zoning action along with pipeline projects and sites that already accommodate residential. And same situation in 5 and 6.
And I will say that each of those numbers on the screen on different sites matches up with the chart that we have in the housing element candidate sites table. And so you can find the exact address, parcel number, and the number of units that are expected in each of those sites.
Perfect. I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
I have a quickie while this is on the screen. The pipeline projects, I'm assuming are projects that have already gotten approvals or have started construction, or is it something different?
It's projects that have started the application process, not necessarily construction or approval. So the methodology for identifying sites is where they would have the likelihood of developing in the planning period. So these are where applications were made.
Okay, so included in those numbers are no projects that have started or completed?
Some may have been started now. So the pipeline projects were kind of a snapshot in time from 2021. Some of those have actually started as a conceptual development project, were identified that way on the list, and have now actually gotten entitled and gotten constructed. So it varies by property, but we don't have anything that was applied for and denied.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Back to the other screen where it has the breakdown of the low income, very low. Are we following HUD guidelines on that? on the income limits?
So this is the assessment that we were given by SCAG, but then when we look at our allocation of dwelling units that are going toward that as the RENA, then yes, we are following all of HUD's income limits for this housing element cycle.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Actually, I want to ask you about the 2004, before we get to 2021 to 2029, 2014 to 2021, is that plan executed as it was planned, or there is some kind of like short of other units and stuff like that?
So I don't have the exact number committed to memory, but the fifth cycle, our allocation, instead of being 17,453, was just over 8,000 units. We did construct more than the total units. The numbers by income category vary. We did do more market rate than our allocation. So in total number of units, yes, we did exceed the 8,000 plus units that were allocated to the city. This is significantly higher in terms of the allocation that the city's been assigned. The other component is also the policy program. So we annually look at how we're doing in terms of implementing our policies. And that could be code amendments, that could be Section 8 housing vouchers, that could be park upgrades, added hours at libraries, and we look at that annually and make a report to the council, which we report to the state. So that happens on an ongoing basis, and we're I think achieving on our policy program as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to open the public hearing and ask the secretary to call forward any comments from members of the public. Come on, Mark. You're first.
How appropriate, I live in the first district. I just wanted to point out the fact that anything to do with housing in this city is the single most important issue as we continue into this century, and we have to get it right. We have to make sure that the future generations can look back at this moment in time and say that they got it right, because as we go on, there's so much uncertainty out there with the new administration coming in and people losing jobs and things like that. We're going to need more and more help with the people on the lower end of the economic spectrum. And it doesn't take rocket science to understand that. And in the fact that you have to basically work from the bottom up, and we have to make sure that the people that are in most need are the ones that we're going to cater to, because it's getting very dire out there for the community, and every day you hear more and more negative and people's uncertainty. I myself, I live in a converted motel. It was the old El Dorado Motel in West Anaheim. It was all converted into very nice apartments, beautiful apartments, but it's still classified as a business because it was a motel. The city has not changed the zoning, and I'm getting off the track here, but the zoning is still considered a business venture. So I'd like to see somebody, maybe I have to talk to the council or the people upstairs, but the fact that it is residential now, and it has been for the last 4 years, it should be readdressed as a zoning issue for people that are living there, and it's not a business. The reason I mention that is because the cable company, our Spectrum Cable, still calls it a business, and it's not a business. And so we're being charged as a business rate, which is a lot higher than a regular, normal rate. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mark?
Mark Herbert, AnaheimGreece.com. I see it's 3 minutes, not 5 minutes, as tradition has been the tradition of hearings. So I must speed through this to cover the size of the project. Everyone agrees that Anaheim has a severe housing problem, especially with affordable units, even the city council. Here are the statement numbers from the previous two housing cycles. Fifth cycle, 2014 to 2021. State estimate needed, 5,700 units. Affordable units needed, 3,200 units. Market rate units needed, 2,500 units. Affordable units built during the 7-year cycle, 453. That's 14% of the goal. Sixth cycle, 2021 to 2029. State estimate needed 17,453 units. Affordable state estimate, 9,109 units. Market rate estimate, 8,344 units. Affordable units built in the first 3.5 years of the cycle, 498 units, 5.4%. In the last 10 years, the affordable housing shortage has tripled in size. The current draft is the same one that has led Anaheim to where it is today. It originated during the city councils and has been embraced by the O'Neill and Aiken councils. They believed excluding the public from the process was in the public's interest. I don't share this belief. The lack of public engagement is at the heart of this problem. The numbers show it. The Housing Element Update Committee was created to fulfill the city's responsibility to the state to provide for public engagement in the approval process. According to the city's website, the main purpose of the HEUC is to devise and provide input. The HEUC met for the first time March 21st, March 2021, monthly through September 2021, for a total of 7 meetings, averaging 2 hours apiece, 14 hours, in order to get through the first draft. There has been no meetings on the succeeding drafts. Todd Ament was a member of the HEUC. He pleaded guilty to a felony in July 2022. On the city's website, he is still listed as a member until mid-2024. This kind of illustrates what a mockery this process is in terms of public engagement. That I'm in a 3-minute comment supposed to address a 730-page report that took the Housing Element Update Committee, when they met, 14 hours to address the first. In case you want to engage with me, I have several hundred questions here and over 100 pages of written pages that I've tried to submit over the past 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Nelson.
Hello. In the current housing element draft, the 2 largest housing projects, Salt Development, zoned for over 500 units, and Angel Stadium, zoned for over 5,000 units, had been set for approval, but they died prematurely. At the last minute, intervention from parties outside the planning process killed both projects. Salt Development killed by public engagement, and Angel Stadium killed by the Attorney General and the FBI. Projects 35, 36, and 70 are 3 other examples of why additional time is required for public engagement. As the process stands now, the Planning Commission and staff lack the capacity and will to protect the public's interest in the process. Until the council steps forward to provide direction, the appointed Planning Commission and staff will remain reluctant to act. Resident Bill Erickson's comment on Salt Development's manipulation of the planning process is another example. The misrepresentation of the fire protection issue in the high-risk fire zone of Anaheim Hills was the latest, most serious breakdown in the process. An outside investigation might view Salt's actions as criminal or view the Planning Commission staffs and councils as a cover-up. The residents of Anaheim should not be routinely facing at the last minute of a 3.5-year planning process errors as numerous and large as these. Residents shouldn't have had to rely on the Attorney General to step in at the last minute to catch the violations of the Surplus Land Act and the sale of the Angel Stadium. That the Attorney General needed to issue a fine the size of $96 million to get Anaheim's attention speaks for itself. The public's exclusion from the process through the cancellation of the 40 consecutive Housing Element Update Committee monthly meetings during the past 3.5 years is sad. It wasn't due solely to the actions of the ex-mayor, the notorious Mayor Sadu and his notorious council. The public's exclusion from the process continued after the felony convictions of Sadu and as well as Todd Ament, the chamber head who also happened to be a member of that committee. It continued through the actions of acting mayor, I called him the play mayor, Trevor O'Neill and his council, and sadly it continues today through the actions of Mayor Aiken and the council. This is how public engagement in Anaheim looks today. The public is left making 3-minute public comments to a council more focused on their iPhones than the speakers. 2, the public is left submitting written questions, not in the hopes of receiving answers, but in the hopes that they'll at least be pasted in at the last minute at the end in the community outreach and engagement section of the final draft. 3, the public is left requesting a delay in the process so the new members of the Planning Commission and Council have time to read the 730-page draft and the public's written comments before making a decision. 4, the public is left waiting while the answers to the dozens of questions raised and listed in the minutes of the 7 committee meetings that did happen are found and shared. 5, the public is left filing and waiting for their public record request to be answered.
I'm sorry,
5B, the comments get shortened from 5 minutes to.
Thank you, sir. The mic's already been cut off, sir. Sir, your time is up. It hasn't been 5 minutes since I've been here. Would anyone else like to speak? I'm going to close the public hearing. And does staff wish to readdress anything?
No, thank you.
Maybe just to put it on the record, the sites that were mentioned, the SALT project and the Angels project, were included as pipeline in the original version that came to the Planning Commission and was submitted to the state in October of 2021, but were removed based on staff's analysis of development not likely happening in the planning period for the June 2022 draft that was submitted.
Thank you. Does anyone in the Planning Commission want to follow up? Go ahead.
I just have a couple more follow-up questions. So in conversations with the HCD, now that we're finally moving forward to get this approved, were there any discussions about completing the goals of this RENA cycle if we're essentially starting halfway, even though we've kept the same policies in that sense? Was there any kind of conversation with?
Yeah, so we've, as I think I mentioned at the workshop, so even though we haven't had the plan in place or the policy program in place, we've been moving forward as if it's been in place. So we've continued to do all of the commitments that we've made in terms of the deadlines that we've been setting, and will continue to do so. So we've continued to make the annual reports to the state, showing what we've been doing, advanced some things ahead of schedule as well. So we're moving forward as if we have the plan adopted.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to get it on record that essentially approving this at a delayed time in 2025 isn't going to affect the completion of the goals. set before us. Now, kind of my next follow-up question with is the housing element as entirety. Do we, in terms of the staff or in their analysis, do you guys look at how the specific plans we already have in the city further impact the housing element, and whether we should be having more specific plans because it does address, I guess, typography of unit and product types that could be potentially developed or not developed?
I think I'll answer that two ways. So I would say a specific plan alone does not solve the housing affordability crisis. So you'll note that some of the sites that we identified in District 1 were sites that we identified as residential within the Beach Boulevard that have not yet been developed. So there's a tool out there should the market wish to use it. As you'll see as we come forward to the next meeting, we're bringing forward some zoning tools that really can be used citywide. So when we started with the Central City Corridors specific plan program, we quickly realized that those tools would work on multiple properties. So we're bringing that forward at the next meeting as well.
Okay, perfect, because that's where I was going to go with it in terms of earlier in the meeting you were discussing about using RCAA and using, where we could essentially move over units that are impacted by income areas. And essentially, right, if we are maximizing our land use availability through zoning tools, we could be achieving that. I guess, not to say to game the method, but essentially we can maximize the products available that we could be built, correct?
Certainly, yes. So one of the things that we look at in the analysis as part of the housing element is do we have zoning and other regulations on the books that are constraining housing? So we go through that exercise where we have existing regulations in place that may constrain. We identify that we will look at improvements. And I think as you've seen with our annual code updates, we're constantly looking for how do we kind of right-size regulations to remove barriers, to make development in general more efficient and kind of best practice for a municipal agency.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That was it for my questions.
Anybody else?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussions? Shall we vote?
Seven yes votes, the motion carries.
Thank you very much. Commission updates.
Thank you, Chair Walker. So on March 24th, our next Planning Commission meeting, we will have the general plan update and the program EIR. We will also have an expansion of an existing Toyota dealership. On April 7th, we will have a Starbucks drive-through, new construction. And on April 21st, we have an industrial subdivision of an existing industrial development. As far as City Council is concerned, on March 25th, we will see the appeal of the Mills Act windows decision that you saw come before you a couple meetings ago. And we will have the general plan and housing element annual progress report at that meeting as well. That's all I've got.
Anybody have anything else? We're adjourned.